Now, just like we learned for consumers in the consumer behavior lecture, that there is a decision-making process that we go through, as well as a buying process that we go through. The buying process for organizations is similar, but a little bit of difference occurring. But overall, the organizational buying behavior is that decision-making process that organizations use to help them establish the needs for products or services that they have, identify and evaluate options, and then ultimately choose among different brands and suppliers that meet those criteria that they have. Now, when we consider how this decision-making process works for organizations, it's going to be quite different. And that's because for low involvement products, you may only need one person in the organization, typically your purchasing manager. But when we get into big level decisions, you're going to be dealing with what we call a buying center. So a group of individuals that come together to make a decision. So again, think about it in terms of even the size of the order. When we say that it's going to potentially be something with a high dollar value for this organization, rather than relying on one individual to make that decision, they typically will have a group of individuals who come together. So this creates the buying center, the group of people who participate in the actual buying process. Now, the people in the buying center are going to rely heavily on the product that's going to be purchased, meaning it depends a lot on the type of product, who's going to be using it, what its function is. That will adjust the people that are included in that buying center. So when working at the buying center, there are 4 important questions to sort of ask to help provide guidance on understanding how the buying center is functioning within the organization. The first question is, which individuals are in the buying center in general? So who's involved? We want to make sure we have an understanding of who's involved in the process. What is the relative influence of each member within the group? So what is each person in charge of? And they may have multiple functions. They may have 2 different roles that they're fulfilling. And we'll see the different roles in just a minute. But we want to be aware of who is doing what. What are the buying criteria of each of the members? So this, again, is important to understand. What are the attributes that they are looking for? Once we know what attributes about the product are important, then we can be sure to sell and market those particular attributes of the product. And lastly, how does each member of the group perceive our firm, our products, and even our salespeople? So what do they think about our product in general, and what do they think about our team in general? How can we position our sales or our marketing of the product based on that? Now let's look at the different roles within the buying center itself. So remember, I told you that people can do different things, and they may do multiple things within the buying center. So the first type of individuals we have in there are what we call the users. Now these are going to be the people in the organization who will actually be using the product. So let's say, for instance, that your organization is, let's say, a university and you're buying desks. Well, if you included a student in it who is actually using the desk, they would be the users of it. And they could be part of the buying center to simply give perspective from the people who are going to be using it. We also can have the influencers. So influencers affect the buying decision by providing specification about what's being bought. So these are typically going to be the people who are experts on that product area. So if you are buying new software for your organization, this might be your IT person who has a knowledge of the technical aspect that is needed for the particular software. Is it going to be compatible with what you have in your organization already? Then we have the buyers. So buyers are usually an individual who is going to have the actual authority to make the purchase. So often this is your purchasing manager, but this is the person who can make the ultimate decision and sign off on the purchase itself. The deciders are going to be the people who either formally or informally are going to have the power to select or approve the supplier that is going to receive the contract or that you're going to actually buy from. So they're not necessarily the ones who are actually signing the check and purchasing, but they're the people who are going to make the decision. They have the ability to do that. And lastly, one of the most important individuals to identify are what we call the gatekeepers. Now, they control the flow of information into that buying center, meaning that they can control what suppliers or vendors you're actually going to see information about. So let's say, for instance, that you have an administrative person who is getting the initial vendor list together and they don't like a certain vendor from previous experience. They can choose to just not include that option for the buying center itself. So they're gatekeepers. They allow information to the other members, or they can stop information. It's always important to understand who these people are and make sure that we have a good relationship with them so that our products can actually reach the buying center individuals. Now, the roles and the number of people that are included in the buying center will depend on the buying situation that you're also in. So, 3 buying situations that can occur. So just like in a B2C, different B2B situations require different levels of effort and different levels of involvement. And that means different parties have to get involved, or the number of people who are in the buying center will grow as the involvement level also grows. So 3 buying situations that we can have. One can be a new buy. So this is something that your organization has never bought before. It's their first time. They're going to have to do a lot of external search here, probably get a lot of information. We can do a straight rebuy. This means that, hey, we've ran out of whatever it was that we purchased previously, and we're just going to reorder the same thing. You don't need a lot of information here, particularly external information. You're really just doing a rebuy. We're buying the same thing again, so only internal information is needed. And then you can have a modified rebuy. So you're purchasing from the same company, but there's something that you want to change. So a little more closely. When we have a new buy, so the purchase decision requires thorough research because this is a new product for you. Purchasing of the product for the first time as well. So again, you need a lot of information. And the organization makes the initial purchase of an item to perform a job or a service is the other way that this is happening or described. Then we can have a modified rebuy. So here, a purchase decision that requires some research where the buyer wants to modify maybe the product specifications, maybe you want to modify the price that was previously negotiated. So you want the same thing, but there's some aspect of that initial agreement that you want to change, whether it's the product or the terms on which you purchased. And then lastly, we can have a straight rebuy. So the lowest amount of involvement, the lowest amount of effort. Here we're just doing a routine purchase. It's just reordering with no modifications to the previous order. So those are the 3 situations we can have. So to summarize what we've gone through, we've looked at the differences in the business-to-business markets compared to business-to-consumers. We looked at the different characteristics within the business-to-business marketplace versus the business-to-consumers. Then we've looked at the buying center, so the group of individuals that are involved, what the different roles are within that buying situation, and what the different roles are, I should say. And then we've looked at the 3 different buying situations that can actually be occurring. So that's where we'll finish off with our business to business lecture.